Welcome to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources in finance and health. But the big thing that we address on the show is all about athletes transition out of sport. It's such a major issue today between mental health, financial literacy, and we really want to make a difference. So we interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey, their ultimate transition into entrepreneurship and business leadership. And it's all about teaching, inspiring athletes that there is, in fact, life after sports. So excited today to have Selina Li. How you doing, Selina?
Good. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing great, thanks. So Selina was a golfer. She grew up in Hong Kong and played golf all throughout. Was a young champion over there, and then ultimately came to the States and went to University of Pennsylvania, joined the whole Ivy League there, and was a golfer at Penn. And then when she was done with that, she's still young, but when she was done with that, she kind of got into the finance field, some different types of positions. But ultimately, she had that passion to be an entrepreneur. And she's got this incredible app, Gymii, where she's a founder and CEO. And she's going to tell us more about that a little bit later on. Selina, talk about when you were growing up playing sports, how did that shape you ultimately leading up into college?
Yeah. Oh my God. I feel like golf shaped entirely who I am as a person in a lot of different ways. But I think the main way that it shaped me is it instilled a level of discipline and efficiency in me that I still carry until this day. I was always known as the kid in school growing up that would miss a bunch of school because of golf tournaments, because the reality of a golf tournament is you're often gone for an entire week just for a single tournament. Like it's one day for traveling, one day for practice, a 3 to 4 day tournament, and then travel back. And then when you have multiple tournaments lined up back to back, I could be missing weeks of school at a time. But growing up, golf was really important to me, but academics was equally important to me. So learning how to balance my time really, really efficiently from a young age is something that has shaped me entirely in terms of my work ethic. I had to learn how to, do homework in the plane or in the hotel after a long round of golf, or how to talk efficiently to my teachers and professors to make sure I wasn't behind on schoolwork. And this is something that I carry till this day. And I remember back then I would just have to learn so efficiently because I wasn't in a typical classroom most of the time. Back then, YouTube was like my best companion. I would learn a lot of things, self-learn a lot of things. So the level of discipline and efficiency is something that golf has just entirely shaped my work ethic on.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of it, you kind of summed up, I think, a lot of other sports too. Just that whole, we'll talk about it throughout, but the whole athlete skill set, the DNA is everything that you just mentioned that definitely shapes that. When did you start playing?
I started playing when I was 6.5 and started playing competitively when I was 7.5. So it's been a while, and I started playing for the Hong Kong national team when I was 14. And once I started playing for the national team, it was just tournament after tournament after tournament.
Is it big sport in Hong Kong?
Not really. It's definitely getting bigger. Like now the kids are so, so good. Back then, I feel like there weren't that many people playing golf in Hong Kong competitively, and even less so for girls. Like the good things is I feel like because of that, it was a very tight knit community. Like my best friends are friends from golf back from home.
That makes sense. So let's talk about transition out of sport as far as education goes. It's going to probably resonate more with you and your age compared to maybe some of the older athletes that it didn't really exist. But was there education at Penn related to transition out of sport? I don't mean just like a 1 day workshop, but more like workshops or even classes that athletes take.
There weren't any formal classes per se. There were sessions, so I guess kind of like workshops. It wasn't anything that was mandatory, which I think actually would have been very beneficial, because I think the reality of the situation is right now athletes often feel a little bit behind in terms of life or in terms of career, because they're all opt-in workshops, which is great already. It's a great first step to have that option there. But I definitely think it still takes that level of actually want to do this in order to be in the same room and be in that atmosphere. And if there isn't that want from the athlete, it's something that they could just do 4 years of college and not have that experience at all.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. to have that education. And I think, because when you're done, all of a sudden, I guess when you look at maybe some of the other athletes that you interacted with across all sports, did you see maybe kind of a somewhat of an identity crisis per se once they were done with their sport?
Yes, definitely. I saw that so much. I still see that to this day because I am still quite connected with the golf team at Penn. I think it's the level of identity crisis depends on when they realize that they might not want to pursue their sport professionally. Like, I think personally, I knew that I didn't want to go professional going into college. So I feel like I hit that realization a little bit earlier and I went through that self identity crisis maybe in high school, not even in college. But I feel like for kids where growing up, like your sport is your entire life and you're spending 90% of your time on your sport, then all of a sudden, when you do realize that, hey, maybe this is not something I want to do professionally, or maybe there's other things I want to pursue, there's definitely that identity crisis there, especially if it's at a more sports focused school where maybe it's not that common to do an internship, or maybe it's not even allowed if you're on the sports team. So definitely, I see that self identity crisis all the time, which is really, really scary at that moment. But I think the athlete space is really, really willing to help each other. And that's something that I've experienced as well. And the first step is really just to talk to people who have gone through that transition, which is something that Alumni Direct does really, really well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's what it's all about. I mean, it's just you have to, people are like-minded and they're in that same community. So if they can help each other out, that's great. So let's talk about, I was talking about networking, connecting, and just the importance of doing so, even especially even at a younger age and while you're still playing sports.
Yes.
Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, networking is huge. And I think networking is something that sounds really scary as a term. And till this day, I mean, when I think of networking, I get a little bit scared. But I think the biggest thing is it's definitely okay to start small and start with the people that you know really well. And it's more powerful when you do that, I think, because I always tell the girls who come in as a freshman to the golf team that it's insane the amount of connections you have as soon as you join this community. Because if we think about the Penn women's golf team, which is just a very small team at Penn, we have like when you join as a freshman, you automatically know the seniors on the team. And when the seniors, when they were freshmen, they knew their seniors on the team. So automatically you have like 7 years of connections right in your pocket. And maybe they won't be able to connect you with a ton of people, but if each person can connect you to like 2 or 3 people, that's already like 50 to 60 people right
Yeah,
away. Like
sure.
probably has very diverse experiences, can tell you a lot based on their experiences. So I think it's definitely starting small. And as you gain more confidence, and it's really not as scary as it seems. I think having been a little bit on the other side where people have come to me for some advice and opinions, people are really, really willing to help out. Like, I think it's so scary reaching out because there's always the thought of, oh, like, am I burdening them? Do they even want to help me? Are they really busy? I think having experienced the other side, it's 99% of the time they really, really do want to help you. And it's basic human psychology that they want to help people that they have a connection to. And having that shared experience as an athlete, even better if you're like from the same school or from the same team. But in general, just having the shared experience as an athlete is already a really, really strong starting point that every single college athlete or young kid out there should leverage.
Yeah, and if it's you're right, it can be intimidating. But and I also think I was talking about just having that kind of giving attitude, and we talk about this a lot, is that it doesn't, sometimes you think, well, how can I really help that person? Maybe you're a young, athlete, just, maybe starting out school, but you never know. I mean, it could be helping somebody's kids. It could be helping their company. I mean, there's a lot of avenues out there. So I think, definitely people should have that pay it forward attitude, not just like, how can they help me, but how can I help others? And I agree with you just, and like you said too, you're talking about your team, but then even when you expand that, I mean, like just like in your case, for example, it could be other athletes that were at Penn, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just the athlete. It could be their parents, it could be cousins, friends. I mean, you could see you just your small example there of like the 7 years and how it could everybody if you had how it could multiply real quickly before you know it, you've got like 50 connections. Definitely people need to do that. That's great.
Yeah, 100%.
So and then the other thing too is I think when you're still playing that sport is like the best time too, right? Because that's when you're relevant.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like take advantage of it while you're still a current athlete. I think it's never too late, honestly. And I think even though now I don't compete anymore, it's still something that is a shared experience whenever I do talk to other athletes, or even when I talk to people like, across like really different age ranges. Like it's perfectly fine just to have that shared experience. But I think being a current athlete, you're just exposed to so many more things, and the resources at school, the resources when you go to tournaments, the types of people that you can meet there, like that's something that you definitely don't want to miss out on.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So let's kind of switch gears here and let's talk about alumni engagement. Obviously, Alumni Direct, that's kind of what we're about. But when you were at Penn, was there a movement, and not just in golf, but in general, was there a movement of bringing athletes back to work with the other athletes and not just, again, that 1 day tournament where they got home, a golf tournament where you got homecoming or something like that, but more so of like being ingrained? Do they do that at all?
I think once again, not super formally. Like, I think if I were to think back to the golf team, the alumni of Penn Women's Golf were always super, super supportive. So, for example, every year at Ivies, we'd have people who graduated years ago come back to support us. And those are just very natural ways of getting to know them, networking. But if I were to think of formal events that are beyond like sessions or workshops where athletes were to come back, not as much as I would like. Like there were just one off workshops, but I think those would be so, so valuable to the current athletes. And I have several teammates who have gotten internships and career positions just from these 1 day workshops. So I would imagine how much impact it would have to have a more formalized structure when it
Sure.
comes to this. But yeah, that was my personal experience. It could just be I missed out on some of them, but it definitely wasn't anything like mandatory.
Right, and I think it's important. I mean, there's a lot of it's a two-way street. I mean,
Yeah,
alumni need to want to come back too. I mean, it's like a lot of people's experience might be from an alumni perspective is that the schools it's about fundraising, which they do need to raise funds, but it's how they go about it. But I
mhm.
think people want to be mentors. I mean, like for them to come back to you now and say, can you come back? Especially as an entrepreneur, maybe talk to the athletes, and it doesn't have to be just golf. Which kind of leads me to another question, and this is something that's become more prominent lately: is networking amongst different athletes, different sports. It seems that at least at the level of maybe like say football, basketball, that they pretty much interact within their sport, and maybe not so much with the other ones. What's your thoughts on that as far as different athletes across different sports networking with each other and that with that commonality that we talked about before?
Yeah, I think going into Penn, I actually thought that the athletes would be a lot more integrated. My experience at Penn was each sport was kind of siloed off, not by design. It was just because everyone just had such busy schedules. Like
Yeah.
when you ask a student athlete what their schedule is, it's just constantly packed. In my freshman year, I actually roomed with a girl in track and field, thinking that because we were both student athletes, we'd have similar schedules and we'd like understand and like be able to come back at the same time and like have fun together. That wasn't the case. Like I barely got to see her just because we had wildly different schedules based on our teams. So I think the interaction when you're at school is mostly within your team. However, I think once you graduate, that bond becomes stronger because now when like I talk to a Penn athlete in a different sport, there's just automatically that bond and there's so many things that we could relate on and talk about. So not sure if that answers your question, but basically I think during college, not so much. Like everyone just has so much going on for them, but at the end, like it is a shared experience that everyone can bond about.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that that's no, you answered the question. I think it's like what we've seen. I've talked to some NFL players, for example, and they're kind of like they're hanging with the other football players. I mean, sometimes you see at the high level maybe the superstars of the different sports might be going to games together and all that, but you don't really see them interacting. And I think there's such value in networking, because you do have that common, DNA skill set of being an athlete. I mean, so are there any kind of alumni athlete events like that they have now, like for Penn, like across the board?
There is still alumni, like golf specific events. Like, I feel like at least at Penn, the golf community has stayed really tight even after graduation. So, for example, a bunch of us are in New York right now. So there's occasional hangouts and just a networking pool there. Um, Broader athlete types of network, we do have a online platform where it's specifically for Penn athletes, and that's something that like I think is also like very very advantageous, and just having a platform where I can scroll through and see everyone who was once a Penn athlete. So once again, less so formal events, but I feel like that is something that would be huge and would be something that all former athletes would want to participate in.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you see, I think a lot of the schools are trying to find ways to re-engage alumni athletes, and that would be one area. So let's talk about. I want to talk a little bit about NIL. Again, you're when you were in school, was it NIL had started, right, or just
Yeah,
right
yeah,
after?
when
Okay.
that started.
Yeah. So, especially coming from like, I mean, people typically NIL, it's the portal, it's the big money, but, taking it down to other sports like golf and swimming and track and all that. Give me your thoughts a little bit on NIL, both positives and negatives.
Yeah, I mean, I think my overall thought about NIL is there's just not enough education around it. Like, I feel like I also only just have the very minimal education about it. It's definitely bigger in some of the bigger sports, but I think in a sport like golf, especially at a school where sports is important, but at the same time, it is very much like a student athlete type of balance where a lot of the kids there, like they're not planning to go professional. And just because of that, I feel like the NIL opportunities decrease a little bit. But having talked to like athletes from other schools, I feel like NIL is just like it's a huge range of opportunities, but the knowledge into that as a student is just so low that you either don't get any of the opportunities and you don't know how to if you wanted to, or you get like a bunch of it, but then you don't know how to manage it. So I
Yeah.
just feel like overall awareness right now is just really, really low. I'm sure it's gotten better since I graduated. And I think like in the last 2, 3 years since I graduated, it's definitely developed a lot. But I just think overall awareness is still at a very minimum.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I think you hit it right. I mean, I always talk about. I think the one of the biggest downsides is the lack of education, and I think that's something that, I mean, it's something as simple as it. You've got to pay taxes, and a
Yeah.
lot of a lot of people don't necessarily understand that, or create an LLC, or just even from a perspective of like marketing and branding. I mean, you are becoming an entrepreneur, and
Yeah.
so like embrace that. And I think there's, and I know different people that we work with and resource partners and all that are in the space that are trying to do that. It's just, it's not all about just getting the deals for
Yeah.
people and
Yeah.
how much it is. It's more about like, how do you guide them? And, there was one guy we had, he hasn't been on the podcast, just, he was one of my other podcasts, but he was a football player in Amherst and Division 3 school. And he was one of the leading NIL people out there. But what he did was he studied it, he understood it. Like he was like right on the forefront of it with, with COVID and all that, and just, took the time to understand it and know how to manage it. And I think that's kind of what's lacking out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a complicated thing. Like, I don't expect young college students to know exactly what's going on. So I feel like more formal education around it, or at least like some type of workshop, mandatory workshop, would be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, since Selena has told, she has watched and listened to some of these podcasts, so she's aware of the questions. She prepped herself for this. So here's the first one in 10 words or less. What advice would you give to freshman Selena?
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely cheating on this a little bit. I've been an avid listener for Rob's podcast, and this is something that I keep thinking about whenever he asks other athletes, and it's changed sometimes. But my current answer for freshman Selena would be to explore, just one word, because I think back then I didn't really know what I was doing, honestly. Like, I knew I wanted to explore different careers. I was an econ major, and I feel like I got funneled into the finance industry really, really quickly, which I don't regret. And I think I learned a lot of things over the years. But I do wish I explored a little bit more back then and just took the time to join different clubs, meet different people that I would never think I would get into, just so I get a better sense of what's out there in the world, because I feel like everything that I explored in freshman year was related to finance. And because of COVID, I did lose like 1.5 years of college. Like my freshman spring until junior year was all back at home online. So I missed out a lot on just being in the college campus and having that networking opportunity. So would definitely want to take advantage of all the clubs and resources back in my freshman year if I were able to go back.
Yeah, everybody wishes we can go back on that
Yeah.
in the DeLorean from Back to the Future, right? And then we'll fast forward. What advice would you give to seniors? So
Yeah. I think senior Selena, I would tell her to believe in yourself and don't be passive, because I think senior year I was in a very different mindset where I honestly back then thought that my early 20s were kind of figured out. Like I had a stable job lined up. I knew I was moving to New York City. I knew that a bunch of my friends were moving to New York City. Like I thought this was going to be my life for at least the next few years. I didn't know how much change was going to happen in the next year, but I think I would want to tell myself to like believe in myself, like trust my gut, go for the things that I want, which I feel like I did. And I'm very proud of myself. But I think an additional confidence boost at that moment would have helped a lot. And maybe I would have taken the leap of faith a bit sooner.
there you go. Good advice. Let's look at okay, so transitioning out of sport. I mean, you've obviously you're probably still playing golf for fun at least, but
Yeah.
you started as a 7-year old and you played your whole life. And then all of a sudden, but like you said, I think you said you accept the fact that you weren't going to be a professional golfer, but talk a little bit about now that it was done from college and you're getting into the real world, so to speak, in finance. How was that transition out? Did you experience any things or maybe share some of what you might have seen for some other athletes that you know?
Yeah. I think even though I knew that I wasn't gonna go professional before college, it was still a huge identity crisis going from a student athlete and going from golf being such a big part of my routine and life to all of a sudden not. I hit that self identity crisis, I would say, like once I started working a few months as a full timer in finance, because the first few months I was like, okay, great. Like I have such like a free schedule now compared to before. Don't have all these practice lined up. But then all of a sudden you do start to miss it, and you do start to miss that competitive side, or just being out there, and like it's a very different feeling being out on the golf course and just your whole world feels like it's all narrowed down to this one single round. And that is a self identity crisis that I feel like I still haven't fully gotten out of yet. I graduated in 2023, so it's been around 2 years since graduation. And I think it's something where you just have to accept it gradually and be okay with it still being part of your life. Like you said, like I still golf for fun now, and I'm trying to play more amateur tournaments, and being okay that it's not going to be 90% of your life. So it's a gradual transition, and occasionally I still do have those self-identity crisis moments, even though like professional golf was never in the cards for me. But when I do talk to other athletes where professional golf was in their cards and they transition out of that, I feel like that is a much harder transition, and that is something where it just takes way more time to accept that fact and be okay with it. But I think being around these types of people and just like talking it out to people who are in a similar mindset or have gone through that transition, like that's the biggest thing that would help.
Right, absolutely. So I guess maybe summing it up, give some, I guess, some words of advice to other athletes. And it really doesn't matter what sport, but just, kind of taking it back in your thoughts from when you're in college and just now you're out. And some people are fortunate, like you said, to play professionally, whether it's professional golf or football, basketball, whatever it might be. But give some quick advice to other athletes.
Yeah, I think the best advice that I could give is like know your worth because employers love athletes. I think that's something that I realized as I was working in finance. Like, you being an athlete has taught you so many invaluable skills. And it might not seem super obvious initially how that can translate to life after sports, but the types of work ethics that an athlete has and the type of drive and grit that they've developed over the years, it's something that is so special about an athlete. And if you're able to harness that, you just have to refocus that type of energy into a new passion project or into a new type of career and direction. At a core, you are still an athlete. And I think the mindset that you build is something that you never lose. So build on that and harness that in whatever career you take.
That's great, and I think that was like the perfect advice and commercial for athletes because I think it's we talk about that all the time. I mean, definitely employers want to hire athletes, and I think even when you look at a lot of what I've seen is that athletes talk about the tough trying to get a job, and they didn't do the internships because like you're saying before they just didn't have the time to do it. But that athlete resume is so important, and I think employers, see that like for what you were just saying. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think employers, if they were once a athlete before, they definitely understand that. But even if they weren't, I feel like the level of respect there is for athletes is just super, super high. So don't be scared if you don't have the traditional internship experience that maybe your peers do. Like, it's never too late to start. And there really is something special about athletes. And now that like I'm building out a team, like I can see that too. I want to hire people who have that experience because it is just the drive there is just so, so different.
Oh, absolutely. So that was a great transition for us to go ahead and talk about what you're doing today. So you were a little bit in the finance field, and we talked about getting that entrepreneurial bug, and then now being the founder and CEO of Gymii. So tell everybody about Gymii and some of the great things that you're doing there.
Yeah, of course. So Gymii is an AI powered consumer app, and the whole goal is to make nutrition tracking easy and social. So growing up as an athlete, nutrition was always super, super important for me for overall health and wellness, but also for athletic performance. And over the years, I've just realized how much of a pain it was to nutrition track. It was just so annoying to manually input the food items, to have a food scale, whatever the method is. It just took way too much time. And on the flip side, fitness tracking was so, so easy. I wear the Apple Watch, I have Aura Ring, and it's just so seamlessly integrated into people's lives. So I wanted to bring that to the nutrition tracking space. So in order to use the app, you really just have to take a photo or a video of your meal. And a lot of people do that anyway. So I wanted to seamlessly integrate it into their routines. And the AI will automatically break down the dishes, macronutrients, calories, micronutrients, all the nutrition information just so that you don't have to do any of the manual work. And on the other hand, I also found nutrition tracking in the past to be a really isolating experience. So I wanted to bring that element of sharing and just a community driven type of app into Gymii. So that's the other part of it. Like, you can scroll through what your friends are eating, have an accountability system, motivation, support. So just making the nutrition tracking experience no longer feel like a chore and finally be something that's really, really fun and easy to do.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like that. How does it tell like what you're talking about you're doing the meal, but like you were talking about the scale and measuring things. And if let's say you got to have a 4 ounce or 6 ounces of protein, I mean, it's not able to pick that up from the picture, is it? Like, do you have to, is there some interaction there, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it actually does a decent job just from like a straight up picture. We use vision language models, and there's a lot of techniques that we're doing in order to make it as accurate as possible. And in the back end, we're also matching it to nutrition databases like the USDA nutrition database or Nutrition 5K. There's a lot of these nutrition databases online. So to ensure that the nutrition information is accurate, when there are mistakes, because ultimately there is some room for error, like you said, we do allow users to seamlessly just adjust it really, really quickly. So the 4 ounce, 6 ounce thing is something that they can like quickly slide if it did get it wrong, or they know that it's like a little bit off. The other thing is if they're out at a restaurant and sharing a meal family style, like that was always something that was a struggle for me back then when I was nutrition tracking. So with Gymii, you can just snap a picture of the whole table or snap a video of all the dishes, and then later on say that you shared it with X amount of people, and it'll scale it down proportionally. So definitely making it as seamless as possible, but allowing users to manually adjust afterwards really easy as well if they want to.
Now, is it geared toward like the individual? Is it what's the model? Is it like a subscription model? How does that work?
Yeah, currently it's a subscription model, so geared more towards the individual, and they can add their close friends on there. We are also exploring partnerships with college teams, college sports teams, to see if this is something that teams as a whole can use, and then their friend could be their nutritionist on the sports team. So that's an idea that we're exploring, but currently it's more so just consumer facing and individual facing.
Yeah, you're right in my mind on that, because we're having this whole conversation about athletes and teams, and I know it's important for performance, like you said. So it seems like it'd be a natural fit for a school to integrate it into their program so that their athletes have that track, especially because, like you said, with fitness trackers and all that, people are used to it now. So having that additional component seems like it'd be pretty beneficial.
Yeah. Well, stay tuned. That might be coming up soon.
That's good. Everybody start looking out for it. So is it live now? Like it do,
Yes.
like, okay.
It is live now on both the App Store and Google Play Store. So just search Gymii.ai, Gymii, and it'll pop up. And also for all the listeners out there that are listening to the Athletes to Entrepreneurs podcast, we have a special discount for you as well. So if you just do Alumni Direct Month or Alumni Direct Year, you can get a discount for all of Rob's listeners out there.
Well, thank you. That's great. I think people should definitely tap into it. So anything else going on? Any other passion projects?
Honestly, currently, this is taking up most of my time. I'm also doing a computer science master's at Cornell Tech right now. So my schedule is honestly pretty filled up. But like I mentioned earlier, I am trying to get back into the competitive golf space just as an amateur, because I really do miss it. I love just being out on a golf course and competing, whether individually or for a team. So that's something that I'm trying to fit back into my schedule a little bit more. But other than that, it's just work and hang out with friends, and that pretty much takes up my whole schedule.
I can imagine it's busy being an entrepreneur. It sounds like a really exciting company. I think a lot of people definitely need to go out and check Gymii out. And how can people find you?
I am active on Instagram, so Selina.Li, or on LinkedIn, Selina Li. Yeah, those are the two main platforms, and please reach out.
Okay, great. That's great. Definitely need to reach out. And you can find us on alumnidirect.com, on our YouTube channel. You can find Athletes, Entrepreneurs, Alumni Journey, and also across all the different podcast networks, and just encourage people to watch and listen. I mean, I think is such an important message. And every episode, it's just the takeaways. And Selina's great advice today and other past podcast guests. I think if we can impact, I always say at least one, but obviously want to impact a lot of other athletes. It is an issue, and we definitely want to help. So we encourage people to get onto the different podcast networks and reach out to Alumni Direct. So thank you again, Selina. This has been great.
Thank you, Rob. This was so fun.
It's my pleasure.